Hello and welcome, I am SimUK, and in this video I will share with you my findings for the forthcoming title Insurgency Sandstorm from New World Interactive, which is due to release on the 12th of December 2018. Insurgency Sandstorm is the sequel to NWI's best known previous title, the critically acclaimed hardcore close quarters tactical FPS called Insurgency Modern Infantry Combat. Insurgency was not actually a fully fledged title, but was an extremely good mod for Valve's Source engine. For the benefit of those of you not already familiar with Insurgency Sandstorm, Insurgency or NWI, I'll quickly brief you on what this series is. This is not Call of Duty and this is not Battlefield. This is a hardcore FPS. One shot is all it takes. Insurgency will not help you out or hold your hand. Or at least, that's the way it used to be, but things have changed quite a bit. Insurgency was and still is an engaging title and continues to be popular online, but as AAA FPS titles have improved, Insurgency's limitations have become more prominent, and because of this, NWI decided to embark upon the Insurgency Sandstorm project some years back, and they set their sights pretty darned high, maybe a little too high. So I'm actually going to give you my conclusion first, and then attempt to justify it with examples. Full disclosure, I am a long-time fan of the Insurgency title, and I had high hopes for Insurgency Sandstorm. I am very glad to say that NWI have impressed me. Insurgency Sandstorm is undoubtedly a significant progression for the Insurgency title. Every existing feature has been enhanced, and many limitations have been addressed or eradicated completely. Despite new menus and interfaces, Insurgency Sandstorm retains its hardcore, gritty, team-based tactical gameplay. The weaponry and gun mechanics remain largely unaltered, except for the fact that bullet ballistics are now included, and I do like how bullets can actually penetrate through walls now. I do feel that the bullet ballistics and weapon recoil needs to be adjusted a little bit more before weapons feel fully realistic and balanced gameplay can be achieved. The inclusion of off-map mortars and air support helicopters adds huge amounts of intense gameplay, but the light vehicles are poor in comparison, despite their powerful mounted weaponry. The game simply looks great on the Unreal 4 engine, much better and more realistic than the likes of Squad, for example, and the performance is nothing short of impressive, with FPS holding a solid 100 to 200 FPS for more than 99% of the time. I have actually had to throttle the FPS back just so my monitor can cope. Unfortunately, and this is a reoccurring theme in this review, despite all of the huge advances and graphical improvements, for me there are too many half measures and incomplete areas which detract from all that is good. And there is a lot here which is really good. Character animations have had a significant number of positive updates, the best of which is the free aim implementation, which means no crosshairs and requires you to aim based entirely upon the direction of your weapon. It just feels way more natural and is highly effective. Movement is more fluid now thanks to the option to vault over objects and even infiltrate buildings via the windows. At least, this is possible for 80% of the game, but there are a number of annoying areas that behave just like Insurgency did, not allowing you to walk up a slight slope without taking the correct path, for example, and some of the windows and doors can be frustrating at times.
Come on, go through the goddamn window.
Speaking of doorways, the door mechanics have also been enhanced to allow complete or partial opening and can even be kicked in or blown up, thereby killing or stunning any enemies behind. I'm not a big fan of the fact that you can kill an enemy just by kicking the door in on them, but otherwise this adds a lot of new options to the game. Despite all of these excellent enhancements and the considerable improvements across the board that I haven't even mentioned yet, I'm actually still on the fence with this one. Something is missing, something is not quite right. And although I genuinely had some excellent moments whilst playing Insurgency Sandstorm, I think reviews are going to be split 50-50, maybe 60-40 in favour. I actually ran a quick poll asking my followers what their thoughts were on the game, and they agreed with me, with 60% of them being on the fence. I do recommend Insurgency Sandstorm, but it's not going to be for everyone, just yet at least. It needs more content. More maps, better maps, bigger maps, more gameplay styles. We only have 3 right now, plus co-op. There are some netcode issues and micro stutters which can ruin what is otherwise an exceptional title. If you're a hardcore Insurgency fan and you want to support NWI in the hope or in the belief that they will increase content and resolve these bugs, then go for it. Otherwise, I would have to say wait and see what happens in the next few weeks and months. For the remainder of this video, I will be trying to explain to you why I have said this and providing video evidence in order to back it up. Insurgency Sandstorm's new menu systems are much nicer. They look better and they're better to interact with. They're easier to read and they have considerably more options and settings available. This really is an important point because the plethora of setting options is absolutely critical in getting a decent gameplay experience, but more on that later. There is a certain Insurgency deja vu with everything in Sandstorm. For veteran players, it will feel very familiar very quickly, and almost immediately you will figure out and adapt to how things work and interact with each other. All the settings are grouped logically, and as such are easy to find, and there are also some preset graphical options which seem well thought out and balanced too, although switching between them does tend to unset some other preferential changes which I consider to be a design mistake. Classes, weapons and attachments and additional equipment remain similar to the original, but the interface is much cleaner, and thankfully it also retains your current loadout by default now. Controller support has been added and we have far more control over the character's appearance, and yes, there are now female characters available in game too. I for one applaud this decision from MWI, and surprisingly it really does fit well into this title, although I will admit hearing the excruciating cries of women on the battlefield is something I am still getting used to. For whatever reason, men in pain doesn't evoke my sensitive side anywhere near as much. Moving on. The last time that I played Insurgency, I had just started to make the transition from controller to a mouse and keyboard. Back in the day, controller support was not officially supported by any of the New World Interactive titles, but it was possible to generate your own scripts which then allowed you to bind and adjust your controller key bindings to a fairly decent degree. And this is exactly what I did. More importantly, I was a pretty decent player using this approach. I am somewhat glad to say that Insurgency Sandstorm does now actively support controllers, as you would expect with the game being released on Xbox One and PS4 as well as PC.
We're upstairs.
Upon loading into the game for the first time, I momentarily considered which side of the fence I wanted to be on. You'll be glad to know that I now consider myself to be a mouse and keyboard player these days, and I could never go back to controllers. But still, it shows that advances have been made and that Insurgency Sandstorm is more inclusive. Hopefully this will increase the player base and ensure large-scale battles are more accessible online. Thanks to the new menu system, keyboard and mouse configuration was simple and straightforward. And the upshot is, whatever key binding setup you prefer, be it controller or mouse and keyboard, you will be up and running quickly and effortlessly. Each scope can be finely tuned to suit your playstyle, but as I only had one weekend in order to test, I didn't even start to play around here. Truth be told, the default configuration quickly felt natural and I was becoming effective on the battlefield and ranking up almost immediately. Sandstorm is far more supportive of new players now. The default setup highlights friendlies and offers customizable colour indicators. Turning this off completely increased immersion a huge degree, but it did have some obvious drawbacks. The most obvious drawback being nobody else is playing with this level of realism, and as removing the marker for your objective is also possible, I did have to keep stopping and checking my map, thereby leaving me open to attack. I do hope that a hardcore mode will be available at some point in the future. The other obvious issue is not knowing exactly where your teammates are, and in a frantic battle, I did on occasion shoot and even occasionally kill my own team by accident. Apologies to all of you. In all honesty, the weapons available in Sandstorm have not evolved much since the original. That's not necessarily a negative thing, as I consider the weapons modelling and gun mechanics in the original did offer an authentic experience. The available classes and weapon combinations again are similar to the original, and really there is little to talk about here. If you like the weaponry in Insurgency, this is much the same, with a few inclusions, like the grip stand attachment for example, but mostly it's just business as usual. However, Sandstorm has introduced weapon ballistics now, and having tested this all weekend, I do feel that this is an area which needs some work. It just doesn't feel quite right to me. It's good enough to play with, but if anything, it's a little bit too easy. I've also experienced some desync issues, which is not weapons related per se, more to do with networking. I have some questions surrounding the hitbox implementation as a result, an area where Insurgency also had a few quirks. It's not so bad that it's unplayable, but when desync or lag kicks in, it is highly noticeable.
Yeah, he's glitching about all over the place there, wasn't he?
It is strange though, because my ping results are consistently low, so perhaps it is a server-side issue or even a hack. To be honest, I cannot be sure.
What? How did he survive?
I have also heard some people complaining about how effective the automatic weapons are in Insurgency Sandstorm, and they're calling for them to be less powerful. With respect, I disagree wholeheartedly. If somebody is shooting at you with a fully or semi-automatic weapon, you're likely to die. That's just realistic. However, I do agree that some weapons balancing could be considered. I personally would like to see more recoil perhaps, or greater accuracy penalties for those who have just sprinted directly into the action. If there is one area where I do feel completely dissatisfied, then it's with grenades. I don't like the throwing animation, the arc of travel, and worst of all, I don't like how grenades appear to stick to the floor, rather than rolling and bouncing about as you would expect in the real world. I don't recall this being an issue with Insurgency, so I hope this is just a bug or a poor design issue that will ultimately be rectified quickly. But as it is now, it's just horrific. Explosions in Sandstorm are pretty good graphically. Fire is not included in this praise, however. Fortunately, we have seen mods in the past which dramatically improved explosions and fire especially. So I think there is definitely room for improvement here also. The inclusion of light vehicles is also an equally welcome addition, and I especially appreciate the ability to duck, although I have to say that the car handling and internal graphics are very poor indeed. Off-map artillery and air support certainly adds a much-needed injection of realism into the combat experience, with hyper-realistic mortar rounds really getting the blood pumping. But overall, the weapons and mechanics feel similar indeed to that of Insurgency, with the one significant change for me being the hugely satisfying inclusion of free aim. I think free aim just works so much better than the crosshair in the centre approach. If you haven't tried it yet, I think you should at least give this a try. The Unreal Engine is a powerful tool, and in the right hands it can produce some breathtaking, even indistinguishable photorealistic effects. But for the most part, it is making all games look pretty much the same. I have to laugh at the graphical implementation of facial hair in Sandstorm. It looks so artificial. It's like a slapstick comedy disguise beard. It is so unbelievably bad, it is like they employed an alien from outer space who has never seen facial hair before, and then they had to explain what it looked like via a fax machine. It's just terrible. What's more is that Unreal 4 engine games all seem to suffer badly when implementing fast-moving graphics, like wheels, or when tracking fast-moving targets. Using the default setup, Insurgency Sandstorm suffered terribly with blur and double vision. I'm struggling to find the right words to express exactly what the issue is, but it's like a constant haze, like maybe I've had one too many and I'm starting to suffer from double vision. There are a number of preset options available for graphics settings as mentioned, and they do make a difference. The only issue that I had with them is that they also tend to adjust your preferential settings like FPS limits and blur. These, in my humble opinion, should remain as you set them and not change each time that you adjust your graphical settings. I am glad to say that after about 5 hours of playing and tweaking of graphics, I eventually hit the sweet spot. I got the game to run really smoothly. It looked great and my experience was far more enjoyable visually after that. There were also a number of graphical glitches and some anomalies. At times they caught my eye and looked like enemy movement, which was a bit of an annoying distraction. The issues I had have absolutely nothing to do with performance. Performance-wise, this game is absolutely top-notch. I have included FPS and network ping scores just below the top right-hand corner of the screen, so you could see for yourself just how impressive the performance here really is. But it doesn't always feel like it is, as there are quite a few of these micro stutters. This could very well be my own system, and if it is, then it highlights the significantly higher demands that Sandstorm will place upon your PC, especially in comparison to the original Insurgency. Whilst playing online, I did encounter a few desync and lag related problems. In over 10 hours of gameplay, this happened to me only a handful of times, 20 at the most. Sometimes the game felt as though it had a 1 second delay between my input and me seeing it appear on my monitor. These issues were annoying, but it didn't really stop me from enjoying the game. Well, it did taint it slightly. The most significant issue I found with Sandstorm was that it became incredibly samey and repetitive really fast. There just seems to be a lack of content and depth here. I think the maps play a huge part in this repetitive gameplay experience, as they are, in my humble opinion, too small and too narrow. And with the dreaded red zone constantly restricting the map even further, this was becoming a bit of a problem for me. I have always felt that the maps in Insurgency were really well designed. They tend to offer a balanced and competitive CQB platform where intense, engaging and deeply rewarding battle can happen. Throw in a decent team of players and some incredibly immersive and rewarding gameplay is on offer. Insurgency Sandstorm is different in that regard. Most of the positive aspects have been retained and graphically things have definitely improved. But for me, this is one area where the game hasn't really moved on that much. If anything, it's taken a step back. Now that might not necessarily be a negative point, because as I have already stated, the maps of old were very well designed, and they did make for excellent competitive combat. It just seems like they could have done more, could have improved on some more of the ground details, and maps definitely need to be bigger. Right now it feels like you are being funneled too much. You have the same conflict in the same place with the same outcome far too often, and with only 5 maps on offer to play, this becomes repetitive really fast. In Insurgency, there were long, drawn-out battles, the fighting was intense, and quite often, at the end of a really good round, both teams would be congratulating and thanking each other. In over 10 hours of play, that didn't really happen once. I had some moments for sure, some intense fighting in tight areas, and I managed to overcome multiple foes and win. But at no point did I feel like I was part of a squadron fighting alongside each other in an intense firefight. That's not to say that there was no teamwork or cohesion. For me, the maps just didn't seem to work as well as they did in Insurgency. They don't seem to encourage this style of play quite so well.
Go on, I got you covered. Go, go, go.
If I'm correct, it should be on the right side, but just careful.
Now, it's highly unlikely that we will all agree on this point because the maps are good. They look great, they are functional, and advances have been made. You can now vault over many, but not all, walls, and although it's not quite as free-flowing as parkour, the movement transitions and the ability to slide into cover are extremely good additions. And to be clear, this is not really what my reservations are about. It's that the 5 maps actually feel very similar. maybe I'm being too harsh about this. I mean, they have introduced a number of really awesome new features, like door mechanics. So to explain, you can now open doors in a number of different ways. You can fully open a door, you can partially open a door and peek through it, which for me is probably one of the best enhancements to maps, as it allows for really authentic special ops tactical insurgent techniques to be used. Or you can kick it in, instantly killing anyone stupid enough to be standing on the other side. For me, I think this is a mistake. Sure, stun anybody the other side, but to kill them? That just feels a little bit too arcadey for my liking. The main issue then is this. In Insurgency, we all start on a level playing field, except there is that irrefutable advantage of knowing a map, or more precisely, knowing certain firing locations within a map that are very beneficial to you as a player. Now, I concede that I haven't spent all that much time playing, but I was able to navigate the maps pretty darn quickly and felt confident that I knew where I was 95% of the time. 5 maps is not a lot, especially when you consider the relatively small size of them. They don't feel small when you're playing, but there are these choke points which may or may not require some adjustments in the future. Maps are an area where NWI are pretty damn good. In the past, they have made alterations to maps, changes to spawn locations, expanding and changing areas to become more balanced. There is every reason to believe that with more time and modifications from NWI, these issues will become less prominent. But for now, this is how I felt whilst I was playing. And also, an interesting choice from the developers is that the magnetic north for the in-game map was actually pointing east. Now that could be a bug, but I'm not sure. I hope it is a bug, because that's just confusing at best. Audio is perhaps the most important factor when discussing immersion. Poor audio is the quickest way to dump you out of an immersive experience, and I'm glad to say that whilst Insurgency had excellent audio, Sandstorm really has improved and enhanced this area of the game. It really is top notch. With one exception, whilst walking through a stream, there's no audio at all. Is this a bug, is it a feature, or is it just them cutting corners? I'm not entirely sure. Incoming fire and bullet ricochet audio is suppressive in nature, and with the newly added suppression mechanic, you really are hunching down low to try and get out the way. Unfortunately, I felt that both explosions and gunfire were two areas where the volume had been set too low. If you are in close proximity to a grenade or a gun being fired, you not only hear that, you should feel it too. And whilst that is semi-present in Sandstorm, to me it just felt like it was a little bit on the subdued side of things. Audio balance is important, but something like a close gunshot or explosion really should be prominent to the nth degree. The game also ships with some really engaging and suitable musical numbers. It can really heighten tense gameplay moments and certainly does not annoy. What it does do, however, is distract and overshadow important movement noises, and I suspect most will eventually, if not immediately, end up turning this off. So audio in Sandstorm really has been done well. I would like a few tweaks and enhancements made, but even as it is, the audio is arguably one of Sandstorm's greatest improvements. Footsteps in Sandstorm are less audible than in a game like PUBG, thankfully. And the sound changes too, not only when walking on different surfaces, but also based on your location. Sometimes you get the echoes firing back at you from close buildings. There are times when the sound of your opponent's movements isn't quite right though. For example, I once dropped within a foot of an enemy who didn't hear me at all, and he really should have heard me land right next to him. Sometimes when you're tracking the movement of an enemy outside a building, you kind of lose track of where they are. I must say that the in-game character chat is absolutely brilliant. They're seemingly always saying the right thing at the right time. It really does enhance the gameplay and immersion, but I would have preferred more human communication, but for some reason, nobody seemed to want to chat much in-game. The only time I did hear chat was when idiots and kids were talking trash to each other. I won't broadcast to you what I said to this guy, but he stopped talking immediately afterwards. Sandstorm really has introduced some really awesome and indeed groundbreaking additions to its gameplay. There is a fully fleshed tutorial which will benefit those new to the game, especially coming from Battlefield or Call of Duty, but that's not all that Sandstorm brings to the fray. There's the ability to vault over obstacles, This is new to Insurgency and it eradicates one of the biggest irritations I had with the old series. Although I have to declare that some obstructions are still not negotiable and some windows will just not comply at the first time of asking, or the second time, or even the third time. It happens every so often and it just reminds me of this historical disappointment, but on the most part the animation here is smooth and it's effective. All of the animations have been updated, some I feel take a little bit too long to finish, thereby increasing the amount of time before you can fire your weapon again. I also noticed that you cannot prime or throw a grenade whilst you're running, another disappointing limitation related to the animations. I'm not entirely sure that you can actually cook a grenade either, I might be wrong on that point. There are a few new gameplay options which I think work very well to encourage team play and tactics. The ranking system, for example, looks to be very good, with great emphasis on the capturing the point element of the game. When you combine with the right team, it can transform a game into a full-on experience, and at the end of the game, both the winning and losing teams often appreciate and acknowledge this. But for whatever reason, that just isn't happening half as much in Sandstorm. There's the 3-part weapon reloading aspect. This is off the charts good, and I expect that all the AAA brands will cotton onto this and see its genius and include it with their very next release. There's free aim, which means no crosshair. It sounds like it would be harder, but actually the angle of your gun is more than enough for you to aim, and if anything, it feels more natural and more realistic. You even have the ability to drop a mag completely, making a reload process that little bit quicker. There are no fast reload upgrades here. Anyone can opt to do this right from the start. And we can all appreciate the ability to get shot through the wall, thanks to bullet penetration, even by your own team. Here you can see my teammate heard my footsteps outside and took a chance.
Shot through the wall, goddammit.
Sandstorm has introduced some modified light vehicles. The physics are not anything worth talking about, and sometimes the perspective of the first-person camera doesn't look great either, but it does add a new aspect to the game and a new option for attack and fire support opportunities. For some, cooperative play is the main feature they had signed up for. The AI in Insurgency and Day of Infamy can be incredibly effective, and arguably they're the most challenging AI enemy any title has released. I'm glad to say that on the most part, Sandstorm has retained this legacy and in some cases seem to have improved it, with the AI actually taking cover and then trying to flank you. Although there are times where they're just dumb bots too. So really then my conclusion is that although there are a huge amount of enhancements and there are loads and loads of great new features, it just could be better. For the hardcore Insurgency fans, this is an easy recommendation. More content is due to be added in the future, and the entire gameplay and ethos is for me far more engaging and enjoyable than the likes of Call of Duty or Battlefield. It is hardcore, it is realistic, but for me it just needs a little more tweaking, a few more issues ironed out, and a heap more content added. I would be lying if I didn't say having 50 versus 50 wasn't high up on my wish list, but unfortunately I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think having more players in a game would be good, but even with such a small number of players, I think that more needs to be done with the commander class. At the moment, the commander class can call in artillery, etc., but it cannot place markers on the map. It cannot orchestrate an attack like you can in squad, for example.
Yeah, I'm currently in D, mate. I'm going to try and push some explosive mortars onto Charlie now. Wait up.
Missing components like these are to the detriment of the game. This looks much better than Squad does in my humble opinion, but has far fewer of the really immersive features. Sandstorm, with multiple squads communicating and operating with tactical cohesion over vastly bigger maps, would, in my opinion, escalate this title to a point where it became competitive with the big boys. But as it is currently, it's just falling short in too many areas. Whatever the desync, lag and hitbox issues are, I can only hope that NWI can find and fix them soon. As for the maps, I think only new content is going to improve things here, and we can only hope that new features include more realism and immersion in the future. I'd also like to see the red mist removed completely. It's a feature that, other than in your complete spawn area, is just unnecessary. I am not a fan of the red zone. I never have been. Some of the best servers are those without any restrictions on movement. I just think that restricting gameplay areas on maps as small as these is just pointless. I much prefer wide, open gameplay areas where, sure, you can be pinned down in your own spawn area. Guess what? That's war. Just so long as you cannot be killed instantly within your spawn area, I think that opening the rest of the map up is a good idea. Let's be honest, spawn killing in a game like Squad is like a sport. At present, there is no free look option that I could see in the game. I would really like to see this included. The grenades, they need a total overhaul. They are just terrible. And why not add the ability to cook grenades and throw them whilst you're running? I also hope to see a hardcore game mode, where there are no markers and only your compass and a map to work with. That being said, I think the ability for a commander or even an individual to place markers really should be considered, especially with a commander leading a charge and having no control over his troops. So I'm absolutely sure that there is stuff that I've forgotten to mention. By all means, ask me or remind me of them in the comments. And please do let me know your thoughts and feelings on the game. Are you against or for, or are you on the fence with me? My name's Mike, this is SimUK, thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this video interesting and informative. Please hit that like button if you did. Till next time, take care. Goodbye for now. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video today. I really appreciate you coming along and taking the time to do that. I want to say a big thank you to each and every one of you who watched this video today. Special big thank you to our Patreons and supporters on Twitch. But everybody who comes and watches, you all count, you are all part of this. And I thank you so much. If you hit that like button, I will like you twice as much. Even more than that, perhaps. It is for you guys that I make these videos, so it matters to me a huge amount if you enjoy watching them, and if you don't, you need to tell me. So thanks for watching, take care of yourselves, until next time, goodbye for now.